Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and professors and people who are interested in what's happening in our neighborhood. Welcome to this seminar by Tengku Zafrul Aziz, Chairman of MIDA, Malaysian Investment and Development Authority. And also welcome to Tengku's delegation from Malaysia. We are here to listen to Tengku Zafrul's lecture, or maybe I should say elaboration on what is happening in his country. Yeah, we have a title called Safeguarding Malaysia's Prosperity at a Time of Rising Trade Barriers and Geo-economic Tension. Tengku, you like to talk about this, you can talk. You don't like to talk about this, you can say anything else. Yeah. But I think the audience would probably ask you questions from all directions and different on different matters. But we are just pleased to have you here to join us in this seminar and hopefully a good, healthy exchange of views with regard to what is happening in Malaysia and how you see your country's own development and progress forward. All of you have seen the Tengku's background and his experiences in and out of government. All I want to say is that he has served as a cabinet minister under Malaysia's last 3 prime ministers. So I think he's a popular guy and well sought after. Yeah, maybe he will be doing more in the coming months given the politics in Malaysia. But definitely today he will share with us his take on our subject matter. And it is not going to be a simple, straightforward subject because there are so many things happening. But given that he has been in cabinet in the last few governments we have in neighboring Malaysia, I'm sure you will find his sharing with us today useful and instructive for us understanding what is happening in Malaysia and how the rest of us in ASEAN and the region sees developments in Malaysia. I think I should stop here, but I'm told that you are paying special attention to people's economy. Yeah, so I'm sure some of us would be interested in having you explain a bit more of that, especially when we read about your writings and your written published comments about the people economy in Malaysia. I think I should now yield the floor to you, sir, and let you explain some of your interests, and then we will take questions later on, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Ambassador Ong, Keng, Yong. Thank you for having me here. It's good to see you again. The first time I met Ambassador Ong was, of course, when he was the ambassador or the High Commissioner to Malaysia. And at that time, I was still in private sector, yet to join the public service. I was the CEO of a bank and also happened to be the chairman or president of the Kuala Lumpur Business Club. And I think you have been a strong supporter when I was president of the club. So again, let me start by saying what an honor it is for me to be here at RSIS. And for decades, your institution has not only contributed to regional and global strategic discourse, but also provided a haven for Malaysian politicians who suddenly have a lot of time on their hands. And I've seen your track record. I'm still a politician, and I still want to be a politician. Let's see whether I survive. But in all seriousness, it is a pleasure for me to be speaking to such a distinguished gathering. It's quite a number of familiar faces here. Please be kind to me during the Q&A. Well, second, only to the joy of actually having the time to be present. As what Ambassador Ong said, the topic today is safeguarding Malaysia's prosperity at a time of rising trade barriers and geo-economic tension. And I just found out today that I can say anything else I want, which I will. So today, I have 3 key points to share. Yeah. First, the twisted plot of a fractured global order and the middle power dilemma. So last week in Davos, I was supposed to be there. I was telling Ambassador, but I managed not to go. When President Trump is there, it's not easy to navigate around Davos. The logistics will be a nightmare. But we all heard about what Canada Prime Minister said, right? Mark Carney warned that the rules-based order is now more slogan than system. This captures the truth ASEAN has lived with for decades, right? So the old order may or may not be over, but the illusion of stability certainly is. So for Malaysia, for middle power like Malaysia, to quote him, he said, nostalgia is not a strategy and denial is not a defense. So we face a world where trade is no longer just trade and the economy is no longer just the economy. Geopolitics and geo-economic have fused like metal under heat. So the breakdown of the trading system, rooted in globalization inequalities and of course the limits of WTO, means ASEAN and Malaysia must navigate a landscape where rules giants collide, and middle powers must try to survive between them. So in our attempt to crystal ball the future, how ASEAN and Malaysia decide to move forward is premised against a sea of unknowns. So one, we cannot choose sides, yet we cannot avoid the consequences. Secondly, we cannot predict the future, yet we cannot postpone decisions. And thirdly, we cannot stop the storm, yet we can strengthen the ship. So, and the risks are multiplying. Geo-economic confrontation, armed conflict, extreme weather events, societal polarization, adverse AI application, and mis- or disinformation. So climate threats, once future risks, are now a clear and present danger. All these make up a complete compendium of concerns, consternation, and potential challenges. So anxiety has been the vibe of every middle power country. The new world order has yet to be shaped. I think we can discuss this today, but countries like Malaysia or even Singapore are already forced to adapt, adjust, and accommodate. And yet, if we do not begin to shape the future will not just shape, but also shake us to our core. Yeah? Thus far, ASEAN's resilience has endured. Our economies remain dynamic, our region largely peaceful, our interconnection intact. Indeed, Malaysia chaired ASEAN last year, 2025. We demonstrated that our region's continued relevance even in the face of global challenges and a fractured world order. So despair is not an option, but survival is not optional. We have collective agency and the means to navigate the challenges before us, so together, steady and unafraid. So that's point number one. So ladies and gentlemen, point number two is the politics of perception versus the reality of performance. This is something that Ambassador Ong mentioned just now about people economy. So I will use Malaysia as an example, but I believe our situation is also relatable in many other countries. On paper, many ASEAN countries' economy is strong. Growth above expectations, investment rising, unemployment low, employment is steady. Our currency at multi-year highs against the US dollar. So for Malaysia, under the Madani economy and various plans like the National Industrial Master Plan, we are positioning ourselves in AI, renewable energy, and future industries. Political stability, unexpected by critics, has held firm, right? But the Rakyat's daily grind tells us a different tale. The macro data says recovery, but when you ask the people, you ask their wallet, they will ask their wallet. Their wallet will say, run for cover. So the chart shows progress, but you go to the checkout counter, it shows pain. This is the contrast we must confront. And having spoken to many Malaysians across the country, the message I get is consistent. They trust their rising cost of living, not what they are told. They trust their bills, not our bullet points. They trust their daily struggles, not our quarterly statistics. So rising costs, groceries, childcare, rent, even education, insurance, transport, etc., shape sentiment more than GDP ever will. So polls reflect this disconnect. Approval for leadership remains stable, yet satisfaction with government performance is split, and economic anxiety dominates national mood. This is not a Malaysian phenomenon, it is global. Affordability, for example, has become the MAGA's buzzword for the midterms, and the gap between GDP growth and daily experience widened after the 2008 crisis and deepened during COVID-19 and exploded with post-pandemic inflation. So when growth rises but well-being falls, trust erodes. And once trust erodes, truth becomes dangerously negotiable. So GDP is a useful compass, but it is not the whole map. It tells us how much a nation produces, but not how much a family can afford. It measures output, but not outlook. It captures growth, but not the grind of daily life. So, you look at GDP rises in quarterly charts with household pressure rises in weekly bills. This is a contrast every Malaysian feels. But don't get me wrong, this is not an argument against GDP. It is useful to show whether the economy has fuel to invest, redistribute, and plan. But when we stare only at GDP figures, we see the forest but miss the families. Because growth, as you all know, and I've seen a few economists here, one of my ex-colleagues on CIB board is here. I've got to be careful what I say. But we can see that growth can surge, even as purchasing power sinks. Prosperity may be vested largely in capital-heavy sectors, especially for Malaysia, while many Malaysians actually work in SMEs or informal jobs that barely feel the ripple. And jobs alone no longer satisfy. People want mobility, stability, and wages that grow, not just employment that shows. Right? So life, unlike GDP, is not macro. Life is very intimate. It is daily, not quarterly, emotional, not statistical, personal, not procedural. And middle-income families feel the tightest squeeze. Economic survival is judged by one simple test: how much money is left at the end of the month. And you flip the question around, how much money is left at the end of the money, and the pain is the same, right? So, in short, GDP can measure the economy of nation, but it cannot truly measure the nationals, the people, the fulfillment of an economy. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's point number 2. That brings me to the point number 3, the crucial need to have the right policy, social buy-in, and regional cohesion in overcoming all these challenges. The government's task is simple to state, but very hard to deliver. Put money in people's pocket properly, prudently, and productively. For Malaysia, under the Madani economy, as you know, there are many announcements about targeted subsidies, cash assistance, and productivity reforms, including AI readiness under the various plans. They all aim to lift earning power, not just economic indicators. Yet, we must confront the hard truth. Consumption alone cannot carry a country of our size, especially for Malaysia. And in fact, for various ASEAN countries, an export-led model remains the backbone of our earnings. Consumption is the glitter, exports are the grit. So one dazzles, the other delivers. So strong, diversified exports are still the engine that pulls us forward. Incidentally, Malaysia just announced our total trade number. We've got a Matrade official here. Malaysia exceed trade of 3 trillion ringgit for the first time in our history. And as the global order cracks, we must shed all hesitations. A fractured world can be frightening, but it can also be freeing. So when the map changes, the bold redraw their route. When the rules shift, the agile seize the advantage. So I believe that for ASEAN and Malaysia, the challenge is not a lack of policy, it is lack of connection. Most of our population do not think the government is uncaring. They think it is unseeing and to some extent unfeeling. So, and in politics, perception is not a shadow, it is a storm. So when the economy recovers on charts, but people do not recover in their hearts, there exists a gap, right? That gap becomes a portal through which populism, identity politics, and extremism march in. Trust erodes, cynicism spreads, and every issue becomes framed as government failure. So without trust, we cannot survive, and without unity, we cannot thrive. So a vacuum of faith is quickly filled with anger, fear, and disillusion. So they will say, if growth doesn't help me, why should I help growth? And the spiral has already wounded Western democracies, and for Malaysia, it will not just be damaging, it will be fatal. So the old era, where leaders told citizens to stop complaining and move on, is gone, right? I think gone everywhere. Younger generations are unmoved by the founding myth that politics today is driven by vibes, not feelings, by vibes, not volumes, and feelings, not footnotes. So ignoring this is political suicide. The framework that might be useful, at least for Malaysia, is to what I enshrine, and I call it the people economy. And the people economy is a shift from programs to impactful outcomes, from growth first to growth and impact together. So the key question becomes, will this policy make life easier this month or even next year? And will it raise GDP? So this requires a new narrative, one that validates hardships, explains constraints honestly, and delivers consistently. So narrative without proper delivery, as you know, we politicians, I'm one of them, is a spin, right? And delivery without narrative is a missed opportunity. Credibility complements communications, and communications sustains credibility. And communication must begin with empathy, not jargon, must be with clarity, not excuses, and with humility, not technocracy. So the old elite to public communication model, and is born, in our colonial times, is obsolete. And Asia is not immune to the disconnect that has fractured the West. Additionally, strengthening democracy's foundation, rule of law, the independence of institutions, accountability, enforcement, and unity in diversity, this is not optional. It is democracy's lifeblood. So much of what I have said been focused on the public and political sectors since I am a politician, but because I also essentially a private citizen with a background in business, I would also like to argue that the private sector is not insulated from the global trust crisis. Businesses cannot hide behind balance sheets when society is burning. We need smarter capitalism, the private sector counterpart of the people economy. And innovation is essential, but without responsibility, it becomes a double-edged sword. Take, for instance, AI. We know it can generate huge profits, improve productivity, but also produce deepfakes, exploitation, and social harm. So if societies collapse, no business survives. So if the planet burns, no profit endures. So captains of industries must ask themselves questions such as, can this technology reduce living costs? Can it widen access to opportunities? Can it share wealth more equitably between business owners, shareholders, and workers? And for example, on technology, AI, for example, a tool that cuts customers, in this case, farmers' overheads, a tutor that teaches school children to read, an assistant that free workers' time for upskilling, rest, and family. The details are up to the businesses, but the principle is universal. No one can outrun the truth, and no business can outrun society's need forever. Sustainable success requires capital that is not only patient, but paired with a conscience. So government, of course, must and can catalyze change, but the private sector themselves must take the lead. Policy can open the door, but corporate leadership must develop their conscience and walk through it. So ladies and gentlemen, it is true that leaders must listen and respond, but voters too must rise to the moment. As identity politics attempt to tear us apart, what matters are media literacy, political understanding, civic consciousness, and simple human empathy. Yes, we all need good leaders, all nations need good leaders, but leadership means little without followers, and followership is impossible without credibility. To me, it's a two-way street. Leaders must earn trust, and citizens must extend it. If leaders cannot be believed, they of course cannot be followed. And if citizens will not engage, progress cannot unfold. So the people economy and smarter capitalism offer Malaysia the tools to rebuild this compact. Though these are serious times, I remain confident that the leadership in Malaysia and ASEAN, that they are not missing. It is actually maturing. It is rising in our classrooms, our companies, our communities. The road ahead will be tough, but not terminal. Malaysia's prosperity can be safeguarded and even supercharged, because in the end, our future depends not only on who leads, but on who believes, who participates, and who perseveres. So thank you, and I look forward to our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Tengku Zafrul, for that short and sharp presentation of what preoccupies you and how you see us going forward. So the floor is now open. I see one hand up already. Yeah, this guy is an economist, so he's very intellectual and make it simple. Yeah, we are all the people. We don't understand what economists say sometimes. Okay, over to you, Mano.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for that spot-on analysis of GDP and all that. My question is, there's an electoral calendar, and given that calendar, probably you will have elections in about a year's time. So is it too late for Prime Minister Anwar to turn the situation around with whatever he needs to do to translate the GDP growth, which is real? And I think Malaysia's standing in the investment community has clearly moved up a big structural notch. But how to translate that into things that matter, and does he have time to do it?
Ambassador, can I stand?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Manu. Thank you very much. I had a good time with you in the CIMB board. He always challenged all our board papers. So glad I'm no longer CEO of CIMB after that. But on a serious note, it's good that you asked that question. Well, for Malaysia, we still have time. 1 year could be 18 months, because as you know, maximum is 5 years. So that will be November plus whatever months based on the parliament session. So Prime Minister Anwar has been very clear. Early this year, we had a government offsite, which I participated as well. The focus has to be on delivery this time. I mean, one or two plans might be due, but the focus has to shift from launching of plans and strategies to focus on execution. Because delivery is important. And when you talk about execution now, I think government and all the various agencies, even the JLCs, have been tasked to ensure that if you do execution well, must report the outcome, right? Sometimes, as you know, when you announce something, especially, I give you an example where you announce you want to help the micro SMEs, because Malaysia have many SMEs and SMEs employ many people. They will I'll give you a grant of X amount, and then the KPI will be, I give you the grant for X amount. But actually the KPI should be, if I given the grant, did that company survive? And did that company do better than, if not, receiving the grant? So that's the outcome based. So we need to move that. So whether you have time or not, as your question is, I think we have no choice. We have to focus really on the execution, and I believe the public service also have to play their part, and the Chief Secretary of the government is also very much involved. So we need to see, and I think this is important. I mean, a key concern, as I mentioned, Malaysia GDP is forecasted to grow 4.9% for 2025, and 2026 continue to grow. But when you go on the ground, that growth is uneven. But when you talk to certain sectors, they are very happy. The business sectors, especially in the key sectors like our exports in E&E, etc. But how do we make sure that we execute better so that more people feel the spillover? Admittedly, there is a lag, right? But it's not easy to explain that lag. So better to execute quickly and intervene where you can in the next 1.5 years, because that's when it really matters for any government, which is the election. Thank you.
Thank you, Tengku. Yes. Okay, I saw Joel's hand first, then later we go to you, Francis.
Thank you, Tengku. A very great speech and presentation again. I'm Joel Ng from the Center for Multilateralism Studies at RSIS. So I was wondering, how does your prognosis extend to the rest of the region? What more would you like to see ASEAN do to address trade barriers, geo-economic tensions, and in the next 2 years? I asked 2 years because Singapore is going to be the chair in 2 years. So what would you like to see in the next 2 years from ASEAN?
Thank you. Well, for ASEAN, I think we have our own challenges when it comes to trade. It's always been, this is cited and quoted, that intra-trade ASEAN is still less than 25%. I think it's 23% last year, despite the fact that ASEAN as an economy is close to $4 trillion economy, but we are not trading with outside. In fact, our largest trading partner today is China, and vice versa. So that's why I think Malaysia, Singapore, for example, pushing very hard for the Digital Economic Framework Agreement, the DEFA, and I hope this can be concluded when this year as Philippine chair. Of course, Singapore will chair next year. Let's hope it's done this year. And at the same time, there are various challenges. We sit down, with our counterparts. Apart from the challenges outside ASEAN, as you know, right? Even today, during the Liberation Day, 1st or 2nd of April last year, we all tried to sit together and see how we can engage the US. But all of us agree the way forward is to engage separately, although some economists will say, why, when you can engage as a bloc with more strength and credibility. But ASEAN has its own way. We always believe in ASEAN's centrality, and in this case, we negotiate separately because we do negotiate collectively for RCEP, for ATIGA, or ASEAN Trade Agreement with China, with India, etc. So I think ASEAN, my point here is actually ASEAN needs to work together better when negotiating with other powers. To say we want to be where EU is, I think it's too early, right? I don't think any government in ASEAN wants to give up monetary policy, for example, right? And therefore, and to be fair, you look at GDP per capita of ASEAN countries, now we have 11. It's very, very, the gap is huge, and you cannot have similar access, similar policies when the playing field is not level at all, right? So that's something that we have to do. So the final point, I think, on ASEAN, apart from ASEAN itself and ASEAN, how we engage outside ASEAN, there are still, as the CEO of CIMB before, we had operation in all countries in ASEAN, for that matter, except for Timor-Leste. But you don't feel as though we try to market ASEAN as a group, but when you run the company, although you have 10 officers, and some are legal entities, some are division, you will find that you are actually not achieving the economies of scale that you want because of the non-tariff barriers, right? Even, for example, simple thing like the chief risk officer, we have a good chief risk officer from Indonesia, and we have a good chief financial officer from Malaysia. We want to move them to become, from that legal entity to become the group. To get a work permit is an issue, right? But it's the same company, it's not a new job. It is the same company, but it's good for people, human capital development, right? You move from one, it's not easy, it can be done, but that's, not even moving loans, moving balance sheet, moving data, right, across is not easy. So I think ASEAN has to be serious about services as well, not just in goods, because services is a very big industry. Unfortunately, services is a big industry for the bigger countries, so certain countries might feel that they are not ready to open up, right? Singapore and Malaysia, of course, we have banks everywhere, so they might feel that we have an advantage, but at the same time, we need to be realistic. If we want to achieve an integration for ASEAN, you need to open up all as many, well, in terms of policies, to be more flexible so that other sectors can also thrive for ASEAN companies.
I think we will let you have a few seconds of rest, Tengku. The real problem in ASEAN today, as Tengku mentioned, how do we take intra-ASEAN trade beyond 25%? Yeah, and as he alluded to, it's not the duty-free issue or whatever, but it's a lot of non-tariff barriers. So those of you who are expert in this area, yeah, I think it's opportunity to ask you all to look at this particular challenge, write about it, talk about it, and I think Malaysia and Singapore, we are quite synchronized in our approach to dealing with what we call non-tariff barriers. But big country like Indonesia and Thailand, they are seriously challenged by the domestic opinion on removing non-tariff barriers. And it's always a false premise that public opinion seems to advocate. Therefore, those of you who are in this area, go out there and take one or two examples and look at it and say, how can we actually remove this phobia, this idea of if we take away non-tariff barrier, our economy in Indonesia or in Thailand or elsewhere will collapse. No such thing. Yeah, but this is a challenge. But I think those of you who write about it should be a bit more differentiated in analyzing why ASEAN is still stuck at intra-ASEAN trade at 25%. Of course, the people who are against this idea will always say this, ASEAN is a failure, it cannot do this and that. Not true. Actually, if people look seriously into it, the cost of living will actually go down if we remove some of the non-tariff barriers. But that is something for all of you who are expert to articulate. I see, sir. Francis, you raise your hand, yeah? He and Dr. Lee, right?
Yes.
Yeah, both of them are economists from one of the think tanks and research institutes in Singapore.
I see, sir.
So be aware. Don't say anything unless you can beat them at it.
No. Gentle questions, but a bit technical. So I have two. Thank you so much for your time and for the lovely interchange. Can I take you back to just at the end of your tenure as Minister of Meeting? Were there any pending items that you wanted to complete, whether it be in terms of trade diversification to a new market or the acquisition of a new type of technological capability, something that you think is there, it's within your grasp, but time ran out? So if you could give us a sense of that. And the second one is, I preface by saying, I'm not asking you to say anything that you cannot say, but I speak for, I think, many of us. Can you take us behind the scenes of the ART? And is there anything that you learned in terms of dynamics on that side, or things that were easier or more difficult than you expected? That's all. Again, I repeat, nothing that you cannot say, but if you can give us a sense.
It's okay. I'm Malaysian. I'll say what I want to say. And I'm not implying anything. I'll answer the tough question first, because I had to answer that in Parliament. Although in a smaller group I have explained, and I believe that this group is, sophisticated enough to understand the complexities behind the scenes, right? We had to go to Washington many times, and to be fair, we also had meetings outside Washington. And of course, my counterpart during this negotiation was, and he's still there, USTR, Jameson Greer, and we do discuss about some of the economic security issue as well, and I met Secretary Howard Landing as well to discuss some of the issues with the Department of Commerce. But the ART was mainly Ambassador Jameson Greer. We met at least 6 times, right? Before we can conclude that. In fact, the last meeting was actually in Malaysia. Twice he came. He himself, and then because it's something very important, obviously, to the US. Because if you look at Malaysia, I think many of you may know already, but for those who don't, US is our largest export market, right? It's not China, right? And the biggest investor that invests in Malaysia cumulatively in the last 3 years, or even the last since independence, is US. Yeah, even last year and the year before, US is by far the biggest investor into Malaysia. And if you look at our export to the US, what is this? What is the breakdown of the export? 80% is E&E, right? So we needed to make sure that out of the E&E mainly semiconductor, and so we had to negotiate behind the scenes. What we do is we look at all the products that we export to the US, and one is areas where we know that US will never be able to do, palm oil, cocoa, rubber, etc. Right? Then they say, okay, all zero. Right? And then we go to the tougher ones, the aerospace. Right? Because aerospace, Malaysia aerospace industry is big, it's close to 5 to 7% of GDP. But it's all US companies. Right? Airbus is there, what do you call it? Sorry, Airbus is not US. Boeing is there, Airbus is of course, but the parts, they share some of that. So the ecosystem of aerospace is there. So we negotiated again. Initially they're saying, no, you have to pay X amount. At that time we didn't know it was 19, we know where it was before. And we said, if you put a tariff of X amount, even 19, you will suffer. So we have to show that, right? We have to show that you will suffer, meaning your companies, and therefore, so they give zero. If you look at the agreement for aerospace. And then come the biggest one, which is semiconductor. Semiconductor is slightly trickier because that also Department of Commerce has a say, because it goes under the economic security, right? Forgot already what section was that. But we still at zero. It was exempted, but without a time frame. And we explained. So we did what we did was we got our team to draw up the supply chain map, right, and show what part of that supply chain, when it comes to the ecosystem around semiconductor, are we in. We show that Malaysia is strong, but Malaysia is strong in test and assembly. Malaysia is strong in packaging. So we complement. We are not in the higher end of the supply chain, fabrication, IC design, etc. Right? So we show that we can work together, and we work. Our strategy was always to work with industries. And if you look at exports, why transshipment, for example, is not such a big deal for Malaysia, because if you look in absolute terms, nearly 80% of E&E export is from US companies. Right? So we use US companies as well to lobby together with us to explain. Right? So this is the reason why I think we also look at what if we don't sign, of course. Because I think Ambassador Ong will know that this is not an FTA, right? It's not where I give zero, you give zero, right? Where it's mutual. In this one is, you give zero, but I give. So we also then came back and said, look, there are red lines for us as well, right? There are red lines when it comes to strategic industries. For example, which is a red line that we are consistent with, even with Singapore or with other ASEAN countries. Because they like to look at ASEAN. What we give ASEAN must give them, for example. So we say, look, financial services, telco, oil and gas, power, all this needs a foreign shareholding limit. It must be applicable to you as well. But of course, the argument is, but you can come to US. You can have 100% of banks in US, but it's not the same. We explain. So they accept that. Because basically, if we accept all, if we accept all their requests, then it goes to zero. Right? But even then, it's not zero. There's a minimum 10%, which I think is the one that's imposed to Singapore. Right? So that is the floor. So they give up the list as well, but we explain why. And of course, Malaysia, there's a lot of issue on domestic politics. Halal issue is a very sensitive issue, etc. So that, I think we stood our ground. But the problem is, in Malaysia, industries are happy. You talk to them, chambers and all that. But when you talk to the people on the ground, for Malaysia, it's not easy narrative to sell. President Trump is not a popular man in Malaysia. America is not a popular because of Gaza, for example. And of course, for various reasons, as we know today, he's seen as someone who no longer believes in the old system, right? And people are saying that it's like a bullying, why are we? But we need to look at the cost, and we have to be tactical. We know what the strategy is, but these are the tactics towards achieving our strategy. So that's why, go back to your first question on the diversification that's required. So we have been pushing hard on diversification strategy. So for Malaysia, we sign as many FTA as we can during my time, and I believe my successor hopefully will, I think, should be doing the same. We restarted the EU FTA, right, with EU, obviously. It stopped in 2012, started again last year, and of course, yesterday there was this mother of all trade agreements, right? And then we concluded with UAE, we concluded with Korea, we upgraded with China, we talked about expanding RCEP, etc., etc. So that's one, and of course Malaysia, we also go out aggressively in South America and Africa last year and the last 2 years with PM Anwar leading the charge. And we've seen it. Africa trade growth is double digit. Of course, admittedly from a lower base, but it's still important. And secondly, I think what we've done is looking at the sectors that we are strong in, because at the end of the day, all this geopolitics, which also geo-economics, is about what you can control. That means we need to be productive, we need to be efficient, our industries need to be able to compete, so that you become indispensable in that part of that supply chain. We can't contest in all, so that's why we had the National Semiconductor Strategy. We see our strength in the semiconductor, and I think Singapore together complement each other with Malaysia on this sector, and then we look at various other sectors, chemical, petrochemical, etc. So those are the sectors that we're looking at, and medical devices, aerospace, and finally digital economy. So those are the 5 sectors that we've been focusing on. Of course, those are wide sectors, and then from there we look at the whole supply chain, both vertical and horizontal. So when we look at this, then we try and plan properly with resources. As you know, when you talk to the Ministry of Finance, they will have certain concerns about fiscal position. I was Minister of Finance before, and I understand. Although when I'm on the other side, I think that I should have done more but I think it's important for Malaysia to recognize the fact that at the end of the day, we ourselves need to ensure the industries that are in Malaysia has to be strong enough so that whatever decision that has been made on realigning the supply chain based on resiliency or security, we are still part of that. And of course, for Malaysia, we already believe in strategic neutrality. Some of you ex-foreign ministry here will know that Malaysia and many ASEAN countries have that position. It's important that we're consistent in our approach towards every country so that we are ready to explain when we sign. For example, the signing of ART wasn't easy when China asked us, why are you doing this, right? So we have to explain why we're doing this and say that, look, whatever, we will be consistent with all countries, right? So this is something that we need to navigate going forward. So lastly, what I think I could have done more before I left, I think I wanted to push more on the semiconductor strategy to move up the value chain IC design. I think we can do more on the Johor, Singapore special economic zone, and I believe that's being looked at. And there are some concerns by both sides of the sides, by the border about who wins more. But to me, we need to unite and make that a positioning to compete against other competitors. Thank you.
You have something to ask?
Yes, I do. I presume we also have liberty to ask on anything we want?
Yes, anything.
But it's related.
Personal life also.
Thank you so much, Tengku Zafrul.
Because it's very boring, personal life.
Actually, it is a...
You're Malaysian?
Yes, yes.
Malaysian?
Selangor also.
Selangor also, okay.
Selangor, yes. So it's about personality. Politics is personality driven, not just about Trump's whims and how they can have global effects. But what I was really seeing, observing through last year, with so much of the negotiations that needed to take place, and I could be, incomplete viewers for sure, and maybe a bit of a bias, but following Malaysia and your role in that, I was seeing that there was a lot of rapport we could see between Malaysia, US, or both parties, and even one-to-one, you and Jameson, Greer. I mean, Malaysia, Singapore, I think they have this advantage of English proficiency, you can talk face to face. No need for interpreter, right? And so I guess my question is, how much was this a very intentional approach, leveraging on a certain advantage? And do you reflect on that as yielding some, also being able to get better deal out of it? But I also want to push maybe also to reflect, is there a downside to it? Because if that's the approach, I mean, you went shopping with him in a supermarket in Korea, right?
Yes, yes.
That's becoming too comfortable and a bit too trusting when ultimately it's still an adversarial relationship. I hope you can be candid about that to share, yes, the ups and the downsides of that. Second question. I see people are a bit greedy. Yes. Yes. Okay. We accept not taking sides. That's the ASEAN stance, and in principle, no one I don't think would dispute. But I feel that in some ways, it's a cop out when we hear that all the time. And I just want to ask from this perspective, why is there, I feel, a lack of defining in two ways: asserting sovereignty, and not picking sides, but on our terms, who we're actually relatively more engaging with, in defining what is the development strategy. For example, ASEAN pursuing green economy renewables. Who is going to be the main partner for that? Well, we will, on that basis, then we'll see, but obviously it turns out to be a little bit more China. But then it's not just like, we don't pick sides, but you have, a more proactive way to say that we are defining our sovereignty, and therefore this is why we ended up, engaging with one side more on another. So one is more about the strategy. And the other, monopoly, right? Confronting monopoly or avoiding, and diversification. I think these are widely accepted principles. So if there is, here's the example about rare earths, where you have a more, China monopoly, that can be a basis to then say that, well, we want to balance it out, and therefore give a bit more space to the US. So my interpretation is that there's really been a shortage of that. What's your view, and why, could that really be something to explore and pursue much further? Thanks.
Yeah. Well, I think that's why I mentioned about the strategic neutrality, where you need to be strategic when you say you want to be neutral. You mentioned rare earth. We did sign an MOU with the US on rare earth, right? Of course, China asked, how about them? So to us, again, we said you can open or start your operations in Malaysia. I mean, we have, for example, Lynas there, an Australian company, but they don't want, right? Because they're worried about, I guess, technology, security. Yeah. In the US, they don't have that so-called same level of technology, but they want the rare earth. But we still say no, because we said no to China, we said no to Australia, we said no to everyone, unless they open or they invest in the downstream activities. So to us, if US said yes to downstream, of course we choose US, right? I mean, China, so we have to be basically giving both, but in the end, like investment. If you look at, investment in the data centers, so the US companies dominate, right? That's why I started with saying that, by far, US is the largest investor in Malaysia. In fact, China is not even top 3, right? So by right, people will say we are pro-US, right? Because if you look at even exports, right? We have a huge trade surplus with US, but a huge trade deficit with China. We should be worried. One of your colleagues said that he talked to small and medium enterprises in Malaysia, they're worried about China, not US. So for us, we need to then look at what is the impact to Malaysian business, right? When we come strategic neutrality. So rare earth is easy. But then we talk about industries where it approach Malaysia, not approach Malaysia's sovereignty, but affects Malaysia's businesses. I mean, we are an open economy, so we have to balance this carefully, right? But at the same time, domestic politics is such that, if many people are affected, and you've seen it in many countries, government has to intervene somewhat. So in the case of automotive, or the case of steel, big industries, I've not spoken about SME, I think Ariel went down there, which is true. People are complaining that all these micro SMEs, even ID, using Chinese contractor, Chinese product and all that, which the locals can't compete. So they compete all the way from your $2 company to your big company. So what do we do, right? So because you're saying that you need to choose one in certain sectors. So I mean, you mentioned rare earth, you mentioned sustainability, yeah? But actually, if you look at it, we look by sectors. You know, we try to be as consistent as possible, but at the same time, looking at the trade-off and the impact to Malaysian people and Malaysian companies. So for energy sector, again, unfortunately, some people may argue Malaysia has a very protective energy sector because for power, for solar, or renewable energy, even there's still a limit of 49% for foreign shareholding. And it applies to China, it applies to US, it applies to everybody, right? So this is something that we need to look at, you know, because energy requirement is getting more and more. I don't know whether I answered your question, I think I didn't, but, you know, because you said it's a cop-out, but it is, unfortunately it is. But to be fair, you know, I did ask the same question, right, in another session, a private one, where I said, the world is changing, right? The world is changing, and people are questioning the economic order. Of course, people are questioning even various institutions, multilateral institutions especially, that has been set up since post-World War II, whether they're still relevant. So we should question whether our approach of strategic neutrality, is it still relevant, right? Because, you know, people say that things are changing, but your strategy is the same, right? But of course, I got some foreign ministry people here. They will say, no, stick to the plan, which I can understand, given the challenges that we have. But I think we have to be selective in ensuring that, you know, we look at this in holistically and choose the side that helps the country most. The first one was whether we get too close, right? Can it cloud my judgment or our team's judgment?
The upside as well.
And the upside as well, yeah, and the upside as well. I think I mean, honest with you, it wasn't planned, right? You know, but by nature, I think he is someone that he likes to engage as well. And for me, of course, I want to engage. And not because he's Jamison Greer or he's someone from the US, but, you know, even my counterpart here, person sitting next to you will know I also engage my counterpart, right? I engage him, right? DPM Gun and all that. So many people are engaged, but it does help. To me, it does help. One is you said about language just now. We don't need interpreter, but at the same time, the trust, I think, is there. When, you know, when we say we're going to do this, we will do this, and we try and so people, you don't second guess. So that when you build over time, and I think that has helped. Yes, there are risks to that, right? But I think net, I think is positive. I think because you should put all the mitigation in place. You know, there's so many lawyers from the AG chambers there as well, who are part of the team. And, you know, for us, we as negotiators, especially our chief negotiator, will have to coordinate with so many ministries and all that. There's always check and balance, but the good thing about that kind of relationship is certain things the civil servants or the relevant agencies involved cannot solve because they will look in silo, and rightly so for certain issues, but then we both can negotiate, look, you know, if we do this, it's not fair because it will hit us here. So we did resolve a lot of things that way because of the trust and also the ability to speak candidly and frankly in our own way without having a third party involved. Thank you. Your moderator, you have to choose next.
Yeah. Next question.
Huh.
No, I think we let this gentleman first. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Ariel.
Okay, Mr. Chairman. My question is still about China and the US. I know last year, maybe last month, you mentioned that I came from RSIS, IP, and my name is Yichao. I met you maybe in the year 2024 in the China-Malaysia summit. Yeah, and I know you are really familiar with the industrial policy between China and the U.S. And the U.S. side, China proposed to sign MOU with Malaysia last month to counter the influence of U.S. So I know maybe it's so hard for you to disclose some content, but would you mind share some observation for maybe some China and U.S. team? Do they have some specific behavior pattern in the negotiation? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. For those of you not aware, China and Malaysia, you're right, there's a request to sign an MOU after the signing of the agreement in reciprocal trade. In fact, when we signed on Sunday, when the Prime Minister and Donald Trump signed on that Sunday, that was during President Trump's visit to Malaysia in conjunction with ASEAN Summit. On Monday morning, Premier Lee and of course Minister of Commerce, myself and Prime Minister and a few others, we had a small breakfast, and at that time the topic is, can you explain to us about art, right? And of course they want to, they are consistent, two things only they want, and it's fair. One is, are they worse off? Is there any clauses that, put China businesses or country at risk? That means, we block them? No. And secondly, is whether they want to make sure that whatever we give to the US, we offer the same to China. And we said, look, we explained and during that meeting, and then we sent a team after to explain as well to China. And that's when the MOU idea came up. And then I left. I think I'm not there anymore. And I don't know, whatever, maybe it's a joke, on your TV there. But, not TV, sorry, camera. So it is important that we continue to engage, right? And I believe the team who are been engaging, and of course the new minister will do the right thing by ensuring consistency again in how we conduct our trade policy with all countries. But obviously it has to be both ways, right? So whatever US give to us, China also have to give, right? And don't forget, we have a huge trade deficit with China as well. And at the same time, when you ask me about the way the negotiations happen, with China, I think Malaysia has also a very good relationship at the highest level, right? When President Xi came to Malaysia last year, and then Premier Lee came to Malaysia twice in a year, and I think President Xi and Prime Minister Anwar meet each other a lot in other platforms, be it G20, APEC, even BRICS, right? So, the understanding of our challenges during all meetings, Prime Minister will say it, and. Of course, I had the privilege of being in all the meetings as Minister of Trade. So I think then there's follow-up with the Minister of Commerce. And to be fair, it's very structured, very objective. Of course, for me, unfortunately, I cannot speak Mandarin, so it's not the same as my engagement with the US. But of course, in our team, there are people who can. But in a nutshell, similar in a way, because everyone will put in the interest of what they feel is fair for their country and explain and justify. And Malaysia has to do the same. Of course, for me, I will always say, we need more market access because the numbers are, moving in one direction, right? And at the same time, I also have to acknowledge why. And sometimes it's about competition, right? Sometimes our companies need to back up as well, right? You can't compete in all areas, and government cannot protect in all sectors. So we need to also, that's why I said back to my earlier point, our companies also have to be competitive, productive, have to be able to compete. You cannot use government intervention or other tools to hide your inefficiencies, right? So there is, maybe we can support you for, but it has to be time-based. It cannot be forever. I give you this support, right? So China say, okay, never mind. You can support this industry, but make sure, if you don't need to support, we can support or have a timeline towards opening up. And exactly what the US said as well to us. And when we protect certain, they feel that. And I think it's the right thing to do. I mean, many may disagree, or especially those sectors that are affected, but I think we need some time to do the right thing. Thank you. Ariel. No, the one there behind. One more. Ariel, third. I know Ariel wants stuff. Oh, okay, Ariel. Trying to escape her.
You've been answering such serious questions. I thought I'll ask you some easy questions.
The easy one is the tough one.
Okay, the first one is there's been a lot of political pushback on the ART.
Yes.
You know, almost going into identity politics, and you know, from sovereignty to Bhumi and all that. So my first question would be.
Doesn't sound like easy question.
No, very easy. So in fact, Prime Minister had kind of said that I assume that you were given some verbal assurances, but that he was thinking that maybe Malaysia would need a written assurance on the sovereignty issue. So anyway, in general, it just looks like there's a lot of political pushback. So maybe if you could explain to us a bit what that is about, and also for you personally, as a politician, what is the pros and cons of, what is the political implication for yourself? Yeah.
On this art
yes,
in particular.
Yes, number two is, where do you fit in PKR? Yeah.
It's getting harder.
And the third one simply
Where do I
is...
fit in PKR? No, one more.
Huh?
So that I can pretend I answer all.
Okay, the third one is, we are in an anti-elitist era, but you've had a very charmed life, at least from the public point of view.
Okay.
So how do you make that transition, and how do you address the people? I mean,
Transition
I've heard
from
of the
elitist to...
Yeah, I've heard of, you've talked about the people economy. I assume that is one way for you to make the bridge, but it looks like a tough exercise for you.
Letting you question him already is coming out of the elitist.
Yeah, well, the easiest one first, about these elitists and etc. I mean, background, I believe, and I've seen surveys on this, people want to see someone who can deliver, right? Doesn't care their background. I mean, Malaysia is more identity politics. You're Malay or you're Chinese or you're Indian, rather than which you come from, whether you're rich or poor. I mean, I have to admit, I come from a more comfortable family. And sometimes it is used against me, and sometimes it's used for me. So there are pros and cons. But at the end of the day, of course, it depends on the constituency, but also depends on demography. And what's important, and I believe this is so, is whether you can deliver, right? Identity politics aside, it is important that in today's world where, it's so fragmented, like you said, and it is important that politicians look at understanding the issues, right? I mean, people economy is one issue, but my background, of course, as a banker before, that's also used against me, right? Because they will say, I'm a capitalist. Most of you in this room probably capitalists as well, right? But there are people are challenging the economic order. People are challenging the definition of, liberal economy, democracy as well. I mean, people are questioning everything. So I think it's right for me also to question some of the things, because my exposure, I must admit, during my previous life as in the private sector, I was in a bubble, right? We have friends, but we are not as exposed when we are in public service. I mean, it's good and bad. It's good because then, you open up to new things, new challenges, and, what's happening to the rest of the world, and what's happening to the rest of Malaysia even. So I think it's important to show that you understand, and it's important to show that you have a plan to do something, and it's important to show that you can execute this. I think that's more important than your background, and I think, and I believe that so. On PKR, your question is, what? Where do I fit in PKR? Well, you have to ask PKR members, but in my view, I feel that I can contribute in the party. Yeah, I mean, for those of you who know where I was in another party before, right? And again, my history, I'm not as attached to a party because for 20 plus years I was in the private sector, and only the last 6 years when I was given the opportunity to Minister of Finance, then after 2 years as Minister of Finance, then I decided to be in politics. And because I was a member of UMNO, my family is all a member of UMNO, my uncle was minister, my brother is also a senior member of the party, and I've been a member, but passive member, since I came back from university, right? Because when you come back from university, at that time, my division head was my uncle, and he said, join the party. So we all joined the party and vote for him. Okay, vote for him. So and at the time, to be fair, I supported Barisan Nasional. That's what I know. And of course, things have changed, right, since 2018, and things have changed again in the last election. But for me, then it's a time to reflect on my values, right? So which I think is more consistent. Nothing wrong with the fight or what UMNO or Barisan is championing, but to me, it's more closely linked to my value system, because that's the time when I had chance to reflect. And thankfully, PKR accepted my application, and now I'm a member, and I think, as you know, I'm now a bit more involved with the recent announcement of my role in the party. And I hope I can contribute, and I leave it to the PKR members and leadership to see how I fit in and whether I can contribute positively. On the first question, which is the easiest, which is about basically your party, yeah. Because to me, my conscience is clear, right? And in Malaysia, there are many issues that are politicized, and some economic policies sometimes are very sensitive to certain groups. You can't satisfy all groups. Just getting CPTPP across the line wasn't easy, for example, and that's CPTPP, let alone ART. Right? ART is even more difficult to get across the line. But I believe in the support of the cabinet, but also trust in the advice of the people involved in this. Of course, I'm not an expert. I got experts around me at the time, and I believe and trust that this is the best for the country. It might not be popular with big segments of groups, but I think we have to defend it, and I think that's what we're doing today. It might cost me some votes as well, right? Although, like it or not, the attacks focus on the Prime Minister, because he is the Prime Minister. So I somehow usually he will get the most hit, and any countries is the same. But for me, I will continue to defend it, and I believe that the problem with this kind of agreement, or this kind of not just art or any decision, only time will tell. Right, and we will see the outcome, whether the outcome result in more investment, more trade, and we'll see what happens in other countries. But there is always, as a sovereign country, AGC has come out and everybody has come out. Lawyers have different views, but we have not put a position where we sold our sovereignty. There's always a way to get out of it if we don't agree. We still are, it's not entry into force, it's not yet, because we still need to ensure that policies are ready, and we also want to wait. From my understanding, I don't know whether that has changed, but during my time, we also want to wait until what are the agreements that will sign between US and other ASEAN countries. Right? Singapore, of course, don't need to, because you are at the floor, there's no point, but I think sectoral will be something that Singapore will need to look at. Indonesia is told me that they are finalizing. Of course, Cambodia has signed, etc. So thank you.
People forget that when you deal with a guy like Donald Trump, you cannot use force with force, Yeah. So sometimes a response to Donald Trump's demand has to be tactical. Yeah, and I see what you have done is to get him off your back. Otherwise, he won't be coming to the ASEAN summit for nothing, I think, yeah. Well, the trick is that you have to have some officials with you to take care of you lah. I think you are defending too much of it yourself, so you should let some of your chaps to go out there and explain certain things. Anyway, that's Donald Trump, and today he's like that, tomorrow he can be completely different, yeah? So at that point in time, he was there for the ASEAN summit, and he was smart enough to make use of that opportunity to take home a win. I think you did the right thing by just going along with the win, yeah, and recover and fight another day, you know. That's how I see it. It's your Malaysian problem, but from my perspective, I thought that what was important was the ASEAN summit, and your Prime Minister, as a chair of ASEAN, had to deliver something on the ASEAN agenda. Okay, enough of all this gossip. What else you have? Anybody? Yes, here on the back. Okay, we shift from the left to the right. Now, right-wing questions, come.
Good afternoon, YB Tengku Zafrul. So I'm currently an RSIS student. So previously I was a semiconductor engineer. So my job is making chip in Singapore. So my question will be regarding more on semiconductor. So just now you have mentioned that Malaysia has the ambitious target in moving up the semiconductor value chain. For example, I do see recently the Malaysian initiative in investing in chips design, right? Especially in Penang and Selangor. But at the same time, Singapore is also a semiconductor hub, and it's attracting a lot of talents, regional talents, including Malaysia. So my question is, how Malaysia government can mitigate this kind of brand drain problems that occurs for many, many years? Because soon after, they will become Singapore permanent residents, then become Singapore citizens.
Are you a Singapore citizen now?
Yes.
He's defensive,
So because I have a lot of friends, they are working in semiconductor industry. Some of them are working in Singapore, and some of them working in Penang. And my friends in Penang, they told me that, oh, I'm going to come to Singapore, maybe this year. You help me to find a room or any unit. I want to stay here. I want to work here. So my question back to the brand trend issue. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think talent issue is a major issue for many countries actually when it comes to semiconductor and many other sectors in technology. Malaysia is no exception. But of course, Malaysia, we have to compete with Singapore as well. So that's why, we need to be strategic. I'll be honest here. I came from the financial services sector. I don't think we should build another financial services center in Malaysia to compete with Singapore. We should work together, right? And similarly, if we look at our national semiconductor strategy, we don't want to do wafer fabrication. We know Singapore has that, right? We want to do advanced packaging, right? And plus, we don't have that kind of fiscal space and got to compete. So we got to be strategic, meaning, if you believe in the theory of comparative advantage, of course, you will look at areas where you will compete, where you get more from it. And in talent, again, I cannot defend if my fellow government colleagues say that we must stop the people leaving, right? I don't agree with that, because to me, companies in Malaysia must compete to keep the talent, because if you got higher pay, why don't you go to Singapore? And if you ask, when I ask Malaysians why they leave, it's not just the higher pay, because they want to move to certain industries which Malaysia don't have, right? For a semiconductor, they want to move up their value chain, but we don't have, that particular skill set that required. That's why I talk about underemployment or employment. That's why when I talk about the people economy, when you talk about employment, although unemployment is at all-time low, but it's not the employment numbers that matter to people. People want to know whether they are getting the right jobs and the right pay, and the right job, meaning whether the skill set they have, believe is relevant to them, to the job that is not available in Malaysia. So it is what it is, right? So we have to call. But having said that, I can give an example where there are who came back as we build the industry. They came back because Singapore has its strength, but also it's not that cheap for some people to and the whole idea of GSSEZ to strengthen our collaboration where focus on the complementarities, right? So this is where it's important for us to. I think it's good. Competition is good, and I've always told the Malaysian companies. The funny thing is, some of them are multinationals doing same thing but pay differently, right? And I question that. But it is what it is. It's supply and demand, right? They will say that the cost of living is different, etc. But then you pay the price and you lose the talent, right? So for government, I think we need to ensure that we create the right. We have to facilitate to ensure that this is less by helping companies have the kind of jobs that Malaysians want, right? If you don't have the kind of jobs that Malaysians want, they will leave. And that's the fact, and you cannot blame Malaysians who leave.
You satisfied with the answer?
But you cannot come back to Singaporean.
No. Malaysia and Singapore, although we have citizenship rules and passport different, but I think at the end of the day, in many practical way, just one big territory. Yeah, I have many cousins. In fact, most of my family are Malaysians, but they don't change. They prefer to stay Malaysian. So, yeah, you have some people who are other consideration involved, especially maybe he has a girlfriend now in Singapore, or his wife is in Singapore. So, yeah. Okay, next question. On this side, right winger, anybody? Otherwise, we go back to center. Anybody? Nobody there? Then I go back to whoever want to ask. Okay, okay, Miguel, you go first. Just now your hand up before we went to Ariel. Yeah.
Thank you, sir, for your remarks. I'm Miguel. I work on digital governance at RSIS. So I hope you don't mind me asking you a question about AI. I want to know what your vision is in terms of the government's role on AI safety. You spoke about how corporate leadership must form their conscience. But I think recently we have found sometimes industry's instincts can fall short of people's expectations. That's why you've had episodes of some Southeast Asian countries, including Malaysia, move to ban Grok, one of the AI chatbots. So I want to know your pulse in terms of where do you think policymakers can strike the balance here? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that app is now banned in the EU as well, right? Yeah, I think so. Some country, yeah.
EU, some moving slowly.
Some slowly, right? Yeah. In UK, I think they banned it, right? Yeah. But anyway, back to your point. Of course, I will try and answer it in a way where, when I was in government, this is a major issue. That's why, the minister in charge, Gobin, created the National AI Office to look at AI governance as well. In fact, Prime Minister Anwar created a new ministry called the Ministry of Digital, or Digital Ministry, to look at partly AI as well as the whole digital economy and how digital is an important enabler for the government delivery. So back to the AI, many of us knows that when you talk about AI, when you talk to companies, they all say that it helps productivity, it helps profitability, therefore, and at the same time, when you talk to another group, they will worry about jobs, right? And we've seen in many forums, corporate leaders are saying that jobs will be affected. But this happens every time there's a new shift in technology. I mean, even when computers just started, also people are saying that even computers can take over certain jobs, which in the end they don't. They improve productivity. But my concern is two when we discuss. One is how do we reskill and upskill the people to ensure that they don't become just a witness in the AI development. They are part of the AI called transformation or technology change. So in government and in many companies, when we talk to them, for my previous ministry, for example, there's a lot of budget given to support SMEs to prepare for AI, and it's mainly for the people, because the concern is, you move to that technology, and people don't know how to use that technology, because companies, they will be, Like you said, the bottom line, it matters. So if the bottom line means AI will help, they will help. And we need to make sure that those existing staff workforce that we have, not necessarily just in the company, but in the industry, can be reskilled or even upskilled to this. Not easy, because the easy way thing to do is to get new people who are already well-versed in application of AI and what's going to happen to them. Even in MITI, I had to look at the automotive industry. When we sat down with the automotive industry, it was a major concern, because when we are pushing so hard on EV, right? And then the supply chain is worried, because ICE cars are different supply chain from EV cars. So, and as you know, Malaysia has built this supply chain for the automotive industry over years, and we have two major automotive players. They are local, both Proton and Perdua. What's going to happen to them? And then I sat down with another group, it's the group of mechanics associations. They're like, what's going to happen to them, right? So how do government help, making sure that, if EV adoption accelerate the way we think it will, but it hasn't, what will happen to their jobs? And how do we as government help them be ready to service EV cars? So similarly, so this is where, for us, we got to get ready for the people and the companies who are going to be disrupted. And banks, for example, they've been disrupted when I was CEO. Media industry is already disrupted and nothing to do with AI. So this is something that I think government has to do. We cannot just say, oh, just be ready lah. You cannot. Because companies, like you said, like it or not, especially, we can't dictate the SMEs to focus on certain things, so we need to be there to help them with their employees. And the second point, when you talk about AI, of course, the concern is about governance of AI. People are, that's why we are talking about AI safety. And YB Gobin, Minister, has always been engaging all the relevant ministries about that, and for us more so on how it may affect not just government, but in this case, industries. Because there will be gaps in policies that we have today, and there will be challenges. I think, if we go down to the AI safety issues, many are not yet probably written in law to counter those potential gaps, but more importantly, getting people to be aware of the AI risks. Thank you.
Coming to the near end of our session here with our speaker, so maybe let's see who else would like to ask any question. Yeah, 1, 2, 3. Why don't we
all three
start?
ask.
Yeah, ask a question. Starting from you. Yeah, I think you got to hang up earlier. I didn't see you. Yeah, you go ahead. Yeah, ask your question short and sharp, and then we get the speaker to comment on all the questions. Now, go ahead.
Hi, Mr. Aziz. My name is Keng. I was a law student from SUSS. My question revolves around choices. I'm not sure how this idea that I have in my mind would fit in trade barriers. But it's about, the theme is about choices. And not so much about human free will, but more like optionality. So the idea is about is like this. What are your thoughts on I feel the thesis that I have is that we have too many choices right now, too many optionalities, and I think one choice is will already kill a lot of people, all the way and I know that because I'm Christian, and all the way from the Bible says that, all the way from the beginning. But anyway, the idea about, and then the picture that I have right now, which I'm trying to explain it, this idea is that if you're like going into like a hotel, right? Then you have one room, and suddenly the room has 3 different doors, right? So the fear that I have is that in life we have too many doors that are open, and then we may get trapped in the hotel. Yeah. So I think, yeah, what's your thoughts on like having too many options at our hands? Yeah, thanks.
Depends on what area you're talking about. Yeah. So in diplomacy, there are multiple doors and multiple windows to get out. Yeah. If you're talking about AI, I think, maybe there are also many doors and tracks too. But let Minister think about how to respond to you. Okay, there are second question here. Who is that? Yeah, young man there.
Hi, Tengku Zafrul Aziz from the Straits Times. Hi. Just quite fascinating hearing your thoughts on dealing with Jameson Greer and so on. I just want your thoughts on, you've done 5+ years in government, dealing with Singapore, right?
He has other account, not only Singapore.
Yeah, of course. But just, were there any frustrations, or do you think cooperation could go faster? What is holding back the bilateral relationship? I mean, there's been a lot of gains over the past few years, but what's holding it back in your
Okay, like the gentleman before you, multiple doors. What option is he? Which door is he going to enter? Okay. There are third question here. Yeah. Young man at the back. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Tengku. I'm Yong. I'm from the Digital for Prosperity Asia Coalition of SMEs. So I think my question is taking a bit of a different shift. I think we've alluded to about sovereignty and about the digital space. And I think in recent times we have seen the conversation on sovereignty shifting to digital-related issues like the digital economy, digital trade, data sovereignty, AI sovereignty. So I think how would you suggest the government or the people to think about sovereignty in those areas? Yeah, thank you.
So, YB, you have all about doors and options. Yeah. You decide which one you want to enter.
Well, thank you very much for those questions. I mean, first of all, I think that was a very philosophical question about, too many doors, right? Or too many choices in this case. Well, in life, you always have choices, right? And usually in today's world, there are many choices, right? The only choices that I didn't have was, no, my wife. Yeah.
That's a very politically correct answer.
Yeah, that's right. It's recorded, right? Save that part for me. Yeah. And but honestly, it is not easy. And even in negotiations, like you said, what are the back doors which you need to have in any plans, which is plan B, or even sometimes go plan C. But to move from one door to another door is also something that you need to consider, because sometimes all the choices are not good for you, and you have to create your own choice. That means you create your own door, right? I think in many negotiations, or in life as well, right, where I choose which party I go to, or what, even simple things like, where should we eat tonight? And I've asked my team, where do you want to eat tonight? Till today, they can't say it, because there's just so many choices out there, right? But
Minister pay, you make the right choice.
maybe that's why I said they're paying. Yeah, looks like it's McDonald's. But on a serious note, I don't know how to answer it, but I think it's a good thing that you have many choices, and it can also be a bad thing if you choose the wrong choice. And always remember that at the end of the day, whatever choice you make, you can create your own choice, create your own door, and if you make a mistake, you must be ready to move to another door, and don't just close all doors when you make a mistake, because sometimes in life, you give up. And I think for me, I've had my ups and downs in both my politics and also in private sector, but you always need to be able to learn so that you can get up and continue, right? I lost the election, for example, in the last general election. I could have easily gone back to my old life, some of you in this room, and who knows about that. But I decided to carry on, and I hope I learned from the mistake and do better in the next one, right? And so you go to the next phase and continue to open new doors. So, and on Singapore, typical 6 times, but, well, can I be honest?
All the rest you said earlier are honesty. So
Yeah,
now
I know.
continue with that.
I'm about to not be. But got a lot of Singapore government officials in this room. No, I'll be very honest, because it is of course, Malaysia and Singapore have a special relationship, right, for many, many years. So you know, there's more focus on that than, you know, people don't ask me so much about Malaysia, Thailand, or Malaysia. But it's always people ask about Malaysia, Singapore. Even when I was in UK recently, you know, in fact, I just flew in from UK last night and struggling from my jet lag. Not excuse for not answering properly, but you know, they also asked me about Malaysia, Singapore as one of the think tanks there. And to me, if you look at where we are today, you know, Malaysia is, I mean, especially talk about trade and investment. You know, Singapore is our largest trading partner. I mean, in ASEAN or in everywhere else, because of course Singapore is a major port. And you know, investment as well. Many of the companies that you see coming to Malaysia are based in Singapore. Well, fine, the beneficial owner is maybe China, maybe US, or maybe other countries, but they all go through Singapore. So I think, and when during my meetings with all my counterparts, when I was Finance Ministry or MITI, and they have been, to be fair, at my level, it's something that, you know, we discuss things constructively. We may agree to disagree, but the channels are open, and that's important. Whether we can do more, yes, I think we can, but sometimes, as you know, we have to manage many stakeholders, apart from private sector, which I think are always complaining why we can do a bit more. But even the government, I think we need to be mindful of the landmines when we agree to doing certain things, political alignments. But at the same time, we also need to be realistic. And if you look at where, you know, I mean, even during COVID, or even during a discussion of the DEFA, and many, even the ASEAN FTA with China, etc. I mean, Singapore and Malaysia have always had this common ground on many of these issues. On foreign ministry, I let my foreign minister talk about it. I think we also have issues that, you know, I think the last retreat also discussed some of the challenges on certain things. And again, these are the area where you agree to disagree because you can't agree on certain things. But if you look at Malaysians and, I mean, on the ground, forget about the leaders or the civil servants, but people on the ground, I think, you know, I talk to them. Of course, this is anecdotal, but I think the relationship is strong. You know, people, Malaysia, Singapore, they are here, holiday, work, and it's okay. And one thing I must admit, you know, I think this Prime Minister, our Anwar, President Anwar, and Prime Minister Lawrence have a very strong relationship, relatively speaking, right? Compared to some other leaders I've seen of both countries. I've seen, and this is good because it has to start from the start. And we need to make sure that we explain this carefully when we do certain policies, because people like to question whether who benefits more, right? They don't say both benefits. They always say, okay, both benefit, but who benefit more? You know, and then in Parliament they will always attack, you know, Singapore because opposition always saying that we always can do better. So that's, I think, yeah, for me, no issue. I'm with Singapore at my level, and I've been very happy to be part of government in the last 6 years. And throughout that 6 years, my relationship with my counterpart and other Singaporean that I dealt with has been good and I think productive even. And finally, this is a tough question on digital trade and, you know, talking about digital sovereignty. There's a lot of issues right now about, you know, it goes back to cyber security actually, right? People are concerned about security of data, and that's why I talk about data sovereignty, security. Even data centers today, you know, with, you know, the Trump administration coming out with the cloud, what act is it? What the act, not Cloud Act, another act there where it allows, although they explain it, that it's not really that way, where you allow cloud companies like AWS or Microsoft to have access, the key to data for other countries as well. But again, they have explained that that's not the way it is. But people are concerned, right? Even for many countries, they want on-premise data centers. I mean, the cloud cannot be in Singapore, and cannot be in Indonesia, but to be in Malaysia. banking sector used to be like that, but now we're more open. But the government also, we are looking at slowly liberalizing that. But there are concerns about data sovereignty. And when you talk about digital trade as well, it's always about data. In this case, even the financial institutions are concerned because it talks about flows, etc. Malaysia, Singapore, like Ambassador Ong said, they're not as concerned. We are quite interconnected in many of these areas. I mean, you can use your QR code, both sides, and then but when it comes to settlements, some of the ASEAN countries are concerned about flows and transparency of their flows because, again, they say that if you share this, it's about sovereignty, right? Actually, sometimes you share this so that you can complete the transaction or you can have the policy to accommodate certain or mitigate certain risks, but sometimes we can't get that data because the challenges of, sometimes it's the law. The law of the country doesn't allow. In fact, in Malaysia, sometimes the law doesn't allow between ministries of sharing data. And that is a problem for using digital as a platform to resolve issues on bureaucracy. But I think that's being resolved as we speak, and we're looking at the various changes in law that's required. But it's not necessarily easy, because there's always reasons for protecting as well. Okay, I think we've...
Thank you, Minister. To me, you are always a minister. Yeah, Yang Berhormat, yeah. Well, I used to work in ASEAN, and I must confess that every time when the other ASEAN countries see the Singaporean and Malaysian delegation come together, they will come to me and say, make sure they don't gang up on us. Yeah, because there's this feeling that Malaysian and Singaporean think alike, especially in economic and trade issues, and they don't like to be neutralized in their resistance to what Singapore and Malaysia would like to propose.
Singapore usually have free counsel.
Yeah. So it is a remarkable relationship between our two countries, Singapore and Malaysia. And as I was growing up, all my seniors in diplomatic service in Singapore always tell me that, whatever Malaysia does, Singapore has to know, and whatever we do, we have to share. If they catch a cold, we will also have serious flu in a few hours' time, So it is a very unique, special relationship between our two countries. But I think, Minister, Wabi, thank you very much for spending time with us. I think you have been very patient, and we have asked a lot of questions, but we also demonstrate that there are many doors that we had to open, and maybe open wider for more people to come in and join in resolving some of the challenges we face in our day-to-day activities and relationship. So maybe let us do the usual thing. Thank you very much for spending time with us today, and we look forward to you visiting us more often and telling us more how to get through certain doors. Yeah. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your participation and your presence here today. We appreciate you joining us. Yeah, have a good day.
Thank you.